dear Lord, please make it stop. This is like the 14th or 15th time I've started this. Like, for real, I cannot stop being silly. It is. It's Michelle, by the way. I mean, who else would it be? And it's August 19th. I had to even think about what day it was. And it's 8:20 p.m. Eastern Time. There's probably something wrong with me, but I don't know. I've got 11 appointments tomorrow. I do. I phoned the doctor on Friday, and I asked, if I could make an appointment, and the receptionist said, yeah, how about 11? And I said, well, I don't need that many appointments. So it's like, what am I going to do with 11 appointments? I don't know. Anyway, here we go. And we're going to start with the first post from today. There are only 2 so far, but of course, Q has several hours still to post in the day, so there may be more forthcoming. However, we're going to start with what we have because even those 2 are quite voluminous. And just so that we can stay caught up. Alrighty. I do have some Q-related news as well today. I may do a second video if I can force myself to be serious. All right. Define fascism. Now, the black, of course, is Q, and anything that you see in red is just things that I have put in there. So, just so you know. Define fascism. Fascism is a form of government which is a type of one-party dictatorship. Fascists are against democracy. They work for a totalitarian one-party state. Such a state is led by a strong leader, such as a dictator and a martial government, And Q, after saying define fascism, he says forcible suppression of opposition. Now, like I've said before many, many times, when Q asks a question, he's usually not asking a question. It's usually a statement. So he is defining fascism as forcible suppression of opposition, among other things, I'm sure, but that is what he's wanting us to focus on here. Forcible suppression of opposition. And isn't that what we have happening right now in the media, in politics, in everything? So Q then asks us to define censorship. Well, censorship is the changing or the suppression or prohibition of speech or writing that is deemed subversive of the common good. And it's interesting because who then is in charge of determining what the common good is? Well, that would be the question. It occurs in all manifestations of authority to some degree, but in modern times it has been of special importance in its relation to government and the rule of law. The institution, system, or practice of censoring is also censorship. Now, define narrative. Well, in this situation, and we don't really have to define it because Q does it for us and does a very good job and narrative can be defined in several ways, but in this case, it is being defined as a way of presenting or understanding a situation or series of events that reflects and promotes a particular point of view or set of values. Now, he asks that as a question, but again, his question marks should really be periods. So it's a way of presenting or understanding a situation or series of events that reflects and promotes a particular point of view or set of values. Define projection. Once again, Q is defining projection as he wishes us to understand it because there are different definitions, but in this case, he is defining projection and then later psychological projection, both of which we have looked at in the past. Projection is the attribution of one's own ideas, feelings, or attitudes to other people or to objects, especially the externalization of blame, guilt, or responsibility as a defense against anxiety. The forming of a plan, scheming. Well, yes, it could in fact be scheming, but here Q is defining the forming of a plan as scheming, and that is part of their formation of a plan and scheming is the whole point of projection. Now there's projection and then there's psychological projection, which is a theory in psychology in which the human ego defends itself against unconscious impulses or qualities, both positive and negative, by denying their existence in themselves while attributing them to others. And we have used this example many, many times of a spouse that is cheating will often accuse the other of cheating when he or she himself is the one that's actually cheating. That is psychological projection. Define narcissist. And Q defines it for us. A person who has an excessive interest in or admiration of themselves. Narcissists who think the world revolves around them. Narcissists preening themselves in front of a mirror. And he asks it as a question mark again, but we know that this is a statement. And of course, there are many, many characteristics of a narcissist, especially if it is a narcissist in the true psychological meaning of the word. They exhibit a lot of characteristics which are actually, if you haven't looked them up, you should, because you may be dealing with narcissists in your own life. It's not just that someone thinks a lot of themselves or, spends a lot of time in the mirror. That's just the very, very, very tip of the iceberg with narcissists, but they can be very, very dangerous people to be around. It's always worthwhile looking into the characteristics of narcissists and how to tell if those around you are. It might shock you. Define dogma. Now, I just clipped this out. This is not from Q, but it is, just clipped it out of the dictionary there. It says dogma, something held as an established opinion, especially a definitive or a definite authoritative tenet. B, a code of such tenets. Pedagogical dogma is, of course, educational dogma, teaching. C, a point of view or tenet put forth as authoritative without adequate grounds. 2, a doctrine or body of doctrines concerning faith or morals formally stated and authoritatively proclaimed by a church. So these can all be definitions of dogma, and the one that Q wants us to concentrate on is a point of view or tenet put forth as authoritative without adequate grounds. Define aggression. And again, Q does this for us. Forceful and sometimes overly assertive pursuit of one's aims and interests. Define suppression. The act of suppressing something such as an activity or publication. Bonus round. Now, I like how he says that. Bonus round. Narcissists are renowned for using psychological projection. That is true. To blame other people, even when it is entirely apparent that they are the ones in the wrong. And as I have said before, I have worked for an organization that was very much part of the New World Order, and that's what they did. That's exactly what they did. You knew what they were up to by what they were accusing other people of doing. And that is how you could call them out time and time again. You would catch them doing something, and the next thing they'd know, they were, preaching against it and coming against it when they themselves were actually doing it. But they'd accuse everyone else. So I do know that that is how they operate. define realism. Well, realism is, and notice there's question marks at the end of these, but they should be periods because that's just a quirk of Q. It's a Q quirk. The quality or fact of representing a person, thing, or situation accurately or in a way that is true to life. And that is, in fact, the definition of realism. And realism in art or realism in anything. I know for realism in art, it's art that actually represents what it's supposed to be representing and isn't done in a way that is representational or whatever. It actually looks like what it is meant to look like. Realism. So then Q says actions of Antifa. Aggression. Projection. They project that aggression onto their opponents, as we've seen. They're the ones saying that the Trump supporters are the aggressive ones. We are apparently the ones that are the white supremacists, and we're racist, and we're this and we're that, and we are the ones that are being violent. But it is actually their actions that are violent and aggressive, and that is projection. Suppression, which is part of fascism, suppressing, trying to suppress the opinions of anyone that they don't agree with. They don't agree with us, so they're going to shout us down, push us around, try to harm us, whatever, threaten, whatever they need to do to suppress that opinion because it's not their opinion. That is a tenet of fascism. Censorship, narrative, dogma, and there's in the whole thing with Antifa, it's censorship. It's all censored, right? I mean, they're not going to tell us what really is going on, who these people really are. It's all about, the narrative and the dogma that the Trump people, the ones that are supporting Trump in any way, are racists. They're, subversives. They're violent. They're toothless. They're uneducated. They're whatever. So, actions of fake news. So he's putting all of this stuff into three categories, into Antifa, fake news, and social media. Okay, so here, that was the actions of Antifa. What about the actions of fake news? Well, you've got aggression, right? They are aggressive towards anyone that's not, purporting the narrative that they want disseminated. Then you're going to get aggression. And that's projection. They call us aggressive, but they are actually the ones that are aggressive towards us. Suppression, and we know our point of view is being suppressed. Absolutely. And that is fascism. That's part of fascism. Suppression of ideas that you don't agree with, that doesn't go along with the acceptable narrative. That's fascism. Both sides should be heard, whether we agree with them or not. I don't agree with everything I hear, but I agree that they should be allowed to say it because it's free speech. Whether I agree with it or not it has nothing to do with it. I think all sides deserve to be heard equally. Let people decide. Let them use their own brain. How about that? And then we've got censorship, which of course is happening, and that's to protect the narrative and their dogma, right? So let's take a look at the actions of fake news. I'm sorry, we just did fake news. Let's do the actions of social media: Twitter, Facebook, Google, YouTube, Reddit, etc. We've got the same thing. We've got aggression. Projection. They're calling us aggressive. That's why we have to drop them from Twitter and Facebook and Google and YouTube and kick them off. We don't want to hear that. Their opinions are aggressive. Really? I don't think so. I mean, I look at some of the people that have been kicked off. Their message wasn't aggressive at all. They had no aggressive message. But they are the ones being aggressive, but it's projected onto us. Suppression, it's the exact same thing. They are suppressing our opinions and our voices, and that is fascism. And then there's the censorship, because they need to maintain the narrative and the dogma, and so they must censor everything that is not everything and everyone that is not going along with that narrative and dogma. Now, Q says, sheep no more. We're not sheep anymore because we have been awakened to what's going on. Now, some of us have been awake longer than others, and there are new people coming on board all the time. So it's important that we keep going over this to show people, to open their eyes to this. Now, I didn't, even though I thought my eyes were open, just in all this going through Q over the last, since last October, I've learned so much more. I mean, a lot of this I knew, but a lot of it I didn't. You know, for example, the 4 a.m. drops to the media. I didn't know that. That was news to me. Didn't surprise me because it was evident that they were all getting their news from the same place. But just things like this, we've just continued to learn. Even though many of us were awake before, we're even more awake now. It's like when you first wake up and you're kind of like, you're groggy and maybe your alarm just went off and it's like, I always hit the snooze button like 3, 4, 5, 6. Or 7 times. Anyway, that's me. And, you're sleepy, you just but once you get a cup of coffee in you and, you have your breakfast and you have your shower and everything, it's like you start to feel like a human being. Well, that's the difference between before and now. It's like before we were awake, but I think some of us kept hitting the snooze button. And now we've had the coffee in us and our breakfast and we've had a shower and it's like, oh yeah, we're all awake now. We're wide awake. We're dressed and ready to go. That's how I look at it. And then Q says, the more you know. Q. So let's go up to the second post, and this will bring us up to date with the Q post as of today anyway. And I will continue to keep... I always want to say I want to keep an eye out, but that just sounds way too painful. But I will keep watching for more Q posts, and I do have some Q-related news that I'd like to get to today as well after this. So we will finish this video first, though, because I can't do two at once, because that would be really confusing to everyone. All right, so this is the next one, and Q says cause. Define subversion, the act of subverting, the state of being subverted, especially a systematic attempt to overthrow or undermine a government or political system by persons working secretly from within. Again, we have the question marks here, but we can safely stick in a period there because he's not really asking a question here. He's telling us what subversion is, and it is the act of subverting. And this is for those of us that have been following the political situation, this is very, very, very familiar to us, what's been happening, right? A systematic attempt to overthrow or undermine a government or political system by persons working secretly from within. And some names jump right into my head right off. Names like Peter Strzok, John Brennan, and a bunch of other names. All right, so then Q says effect. So that is the cause, the effect. Now let's go and take a look at what Q wants us to look at here. All right. Now this should look familiar to everyone that has been following Q, but perhaps not to some newer listeners and people that are newer to Q. But this is the executive order, and it was signed by Donald Trump on December 21st. Well, it was issued then. I'm pretty sure it was signed that day as well. December 21st, 2017. Executive order blocking the property of persons involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption. Now, I'm not going to read the entire thing because Q has pulled out the portion that he wants us to look at. The United States seeks to impose tangible and significant consequences on those who commit serious human rights abuse or engage in corruption, as well as to protect the financial system of the United States from abuse by these same persons. I therefore determine that serious human rights abuse and corruption around the world constitute an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States, and I hereby declare a national emergency to deal with that threat. Now, Q is pointing out and putting it in capital letters here, national emergency. So this is, that was actually a pretty shocking thing, executive order. It really was, because it confiscates anybody's tangible assets that is involved in human rights abuse or engaging in corruption or things like human trafficking, serious human rights abuse. So that's major. All right, national emergency. Now, let's go look at the next thing that Q wants us to see. And this is the 2018 amendments to the Manual for Courts, Martial, United States. This was issued on March 1st, 2018. Not that many months ago. By the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including Chapter 47 of Title 10, United States Code, Uniform Code of Military Justice, 10 U.S.C. 801 to 946, and in order to prescribe amendments to the Manual for Courts, Martial, United States, prescribed by Executive Order 12473 of April 13th, 1984, as amended, it is hereby ordered as follows. So this is an amendment to an Executive Order 12473 of April 13th, 1984. Very old executive order. This new one amends it. It's a 2018 amendment for that. Section 1, Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4 of the Manual for Courts Martial, United States are amended as described in Annex 1, which is attached and made a part of this order. Section 2, the amendments in Annex 1 shall take effect on the date of this order, subject to the following. Nothing in Annex 1 shall be construed to make punishable any act done or admitted prior to the date of this order that was not punishable when done or admitted. How many pages is this? I want to see how long this really is. And I want to go back here and see if Q has pulled out what it is that he wants us to see in this. And he has. So, Section 12, and it says January 1st, 2019, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and we'll go back so that I can verify that, because I don't want to give you false information if I can at all help it. Section 12, in accordance with Article 33 of the UCMJ as amended by Section 5204 of the MJA, the Secretary of Defense, in consultation with the Secretary of Homeland Security, will issue non-binding guidance regarding factors that commanders, convening authorities, staff, judge advocates, and judge advocates should take into account when exercising their duties with respect to the disposition of charges and specifications in the interest of justice and discipline under Articles 30 and 34 of the UCMJ. That guidance will take into account, with appropriate consideration of military requirements, the principles contained in official guidance of the Attorney General to attorneys for the federal government with respect to the disposition of federal criminal cases in accordance with the principle of fair and even-handed administration of federal criminal law. Now, this is interesting. Let me go back here, because I believe this is all leading up to the tribunals, personally. And let's come down here to see. Yeah, it takes effect. I was right. This takes effect on January 1st, 2019. So the Justice Act of 2016, Division E of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2017, Public Law 114 to 328, 130 Stat 2000, 2967, 2016, except as otherwise provided by the MJA or order, the MJA shall take effect on January 1st, 2019. Nothing in the MJA shall be construed to make punishable any act done or omitted prior to January 1st, 2019 that was not punishable when done or admitted. The Manual for Courts Martial, United States, as amended by Section 1 of this order, is amended as described in Annex 2, which is attached to and made a part of this order. The amendments in Annex 2, including Appendix 12A, shall take effect on January 1st, 2019, subject to the following. Now, I'm going to admit to you, I don't know what all this means. And I'm just kind of reading down through here. Authorizes a convening authority to order a proceeding in revision or a rehearing, or authorizes the convening authority to approve, disapprove, commute, or suspend a sentence in whole or part. Okay. Here we might be getting to some juice here. If the accused is found guilty of a specification alleging the commission of one or more offenses before January 1st, 2019, Article 60 of the UCMJ, as in effect on the date of the earliest offense of which the accused was found guilty, shall apply to the convening authority in addition to the suspending authority in Article 60AC as enacted by the MJA, to the extent that Article 60 requires action by the convening authority on the sentence, permits action by the convening authority on findings. I'm pretty sure that this was signed March 1st, 2018. It says that guidance will take into account, with appropriate consideration of military requirements, the principles contained in official guidance of the Attorney General to attorneys for the federal government with respect to the disposition of federal criminal cases in accordance with the principle of fair and even-handed administration of federal criminal law. So, as far as I can see, this is what's leading up to the tribunals and things that have been changed in accordance with that. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and say that I understand what all of this means, because I don't. But Q is telling us that it pertains to the FBI personnel approval plus DOJ personnel removal plus CIA personnel removal plus state personnel removal plus White House personnel removal plus House personnel removal plus Senate personnel removal plus chair/CEO/VP removal plus military budget largest in our history, plus military presence around POTUS, plus 45,000 sealed indictments. So we're leading up to some major stuff here, and there's just no way around it. I mean, we can all say, "Oh, nothing's happening," but really, if you look at what is happening around all this, like all of this would not be happening if nothing was happening. Do you see what I'm saying? Would we have this many sealed indictments, 45,000 sealed indictments? Would we have such a strong military presence around the POTUS? Would we have the biggest military budget in our history? Would we have all these people resigning or being removed? I don't think so. So I know we all complain because we all want to see Hillary in behind bars. We all do, and many others. But it is happening. Maybe not as fast as we want it to happen, but I think it's happening as fast as it can happen. So let's go see what else Q wants us to look at here. Okay, when it comes to Guantanamo, Trump is truly the builder-in-chief. Now, you'll remember that under Obama, he was wanting to shut down Guantanamo, but under Trump, there's lots of money being poured into Guantanamo, and it's actually being expanded. Why? What does he know that we don't know? Well, actually, we do know, but only because of Q. So, Miami. The Trump administration has more than $200 million in new construction teed up for Guantanamo this year and next, combining new funding in the $1.3 trillion spending bill and existing projects. The biggest ticket item for the U.S. Navy base in Cuba is the so-called omnibus spending law, is $115 million for a new 848 troop barracks across the street from the McDonald's and commissary to consolidate enlisted prison staff under one roof. A dive into the documents that underpin the spending bill that President Donald Trump signed Friday, declaring, "Nobody read it, it's only hours old." Or nobody read it, it's only hours old. Some people don't even know what's in it. Indicates Congress did not fund a new $69 million prison for the 15 high-value detainees at Guantanamo. Yeah, there's only 15 high-value detainees at Guantanamo, so why are we pouring all this money into it if it's not about to be used for something, right? Doesn't make sense to me. So it does, however, devote $66 million to a 150 prisoner jail with campus at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington State for troops and airmen accused of crimes. It also serves as a study in contrast of the costs of doing business at the remote base behind a minefield in southeast Cuba, where both labor and supplies must arrive by barge and airlift to undertake new construction. To put the cost of the new barracks in perspective, the omnibus spending law this year is also funding dormitory-style housing for 216 sailors at a Navy training site in Pensacola for $18 million, or $83,000 per bed, compared to Guantanamo's cost of $135,613 for comparable housing. The new barracks had been championed by Trump's chief of staff, John Kelly, during his years as a Marine general at U.S. Southern Command, and rejected by President Barack Obama, who wanted the prison complex closed. The U.S. military has already spent $9 million on design and other preparation on the barracks for enlisted soldiers on the staff of the 41 captive prison, about half of the current strength of the 1,700 troops and civilians, so the sum included in the measure for construction of the dormitory-style So the sum included in the measure is for construction of the dormitory-style building itself. A contractor has yet to be signed. With all labor and materials flown in, the project is an expensive one, and by latest estimates would start with a contract awarded in April 2019 with an anticipated 900-day construction period, meaning the soonest it would be done is September 2021. Separately, the Pentagon has 3 other major building projects approved for underway in 2018. It has notified Congress that it found $14 million to expand the top secret trailer park portion of the War Court complex at Camp Justice, called the Expeditionary Legal Complex, and accommodate more prefabricated office space and secure workstations. A Carlsbad, California construction firm has been awarded a $23 million to $27 million contract to do the work on the infrastructure of a pop-up tent city site that could, in the event of a migrant crisis, hold up to 30,000 people, intercepted at sea not far from Guantanamo's lone functioning airfield. The U.S. military has spent millions of dollars since 2007 building the site on leeward side of the base for the Department of Homeland Security because the original infrastructure was taken over by the detention center zone for war on terror prisoners. So I'm not going to go into all the rest of the construction, but you can see here that construction is ongoing. And when was this? This is from the 28th of March 2018. So let's go back and let's come down to here, to the next thing that Q wants us to look at. And we have this: U.S. private prison program rebooted by Trump administration. Jeff Sessions gave the order to revive the Justice Department's use of for-profit prisons, a sharply criticized industry that Obama had committed to phasing out. The Trump administration has scrapped Barack Obama's program for ending the Justice Department's use of private prisons, embracing an industry that has come under sharp criticism from civil rights advocates. Jeff Sessions, Trump's Attorney General, on Thursday rescinded a 6-month-old directive for the Federal Bureau of Prisons to wind down contracts with prison companies, claiming that the measure had impaired the Bureau's ability to meet future needs of the federal correctional system. Therefore, I direct the Bureau to return to its previous approach, Sessions said in a memo to Thomas Kane, the Bureau's acting director. The move prompted spikes in the share prices of the major for-profit prison corporations, companies which contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars to Trump's presidential campaign, election campaign, and inaugural funds. In August last year, a scathing audit carried out by the Justice Department's independent watchdog found that private prisons controlled by the department's Bureau of Prisons were far less safe and more punitive than comparable facilities managed directly by the government. The review prompted the Justice Department to commit to ending the use of those 12 facilities known as criminal alien requirement prisons, which are mostly used to incarcerate individuals convicted of violating federal immigration law. Last year, the prisons housed about 22,000 people at an annual cost of $600 million. I would think that it would be less expensive to deport them, but hey, that's just me. Now, Sally Yates, then the Deputy Attorney General, said in a memo that research had found private prisons simply do not provide the same level of correctional services, programs, and resources, and do not save substantially on costs either. Essential government education and training programs for prisoners have proved difficult to replicate and outsource in private sector, she said. The move prompted the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, which controls a much larger network of privatized detention facilities, to conduct a similar review in August. But a report authored by the DHS's Advisory Council concluded in December that due to the agency's heavy dependence on for-profit facilities, it should not follow the lead of the Justice Department. There were 13 criminal alien requirement prisons operated by the Prisons Bureau at the time of Yates' memo. One of these facilities in Cibola County, New New Mexico was subsequently closed and reopened as an immigration detention facility at the end of this year. So, that's interesting. Now, let's go back to the last thing that he wants us to take a look at, and that is here, which we've seen this before many, many times. Turley, Sessions appointing Utah federal prosecutor, much better for Trump than second special counsel. We have looked at this and looked at this and looked at this, and I don't think there's any reason to continue to look at it because it's pretty straightforward that Turley was appointed, the Utah federal prosecutor, and basically they were saying this is much, much better than a second special counsel because Turley can actually prosecute the things that are found during the, that the special counsel found, I guess, would be a way to put it succinctly. Now, so let's go back. So we know that there are things happening here. They're definitely building up the prison system, revamping the prisons. Now, I would say, obviously, there's a reason for that, right? They're not just going to do that for the sake of doing it. And if they would empty out all the illegals that are in the prisons and deport them back, which of course they just keep coming over the border again. So I don't know what good that's going to do really, but we would have room for all of the people they're going to need a lot of room for all these people. I mean, 45,000 indictments. I mean, I don't know how many of those people will be going to prison, but it's a lot of people. So I don't know. There's just, there's some that I just really, really would like to see in prison because I don't think that they should be out in the general population. I think they are complete and utter sociopaths. So that is it for Q's post for today. And again, I'll keep looking for new posts and let you know when I find them. I am possibly going to do a Q News post today as well. And but for now, that's it. And I would say goodbye, so long, farewell, stay safe.